In the following interview from this series Voices from Israel, we meet Zvi Givati, a man who is a real testament of the toughness and endurance of the Israeli people. Drawing from his own experience of life in Israel, we get a real insight into the character of this nation and of the people's fears and hopes for the future of this ancient land. In 1939, Britain published a white paper declaring that Israel would be limited to an immigration total of only 35,000 Jews per year. Well, with nowhere else to go, many Jews defied the British ruling and under cover of darkness arrived on these very shores, only to discover that they'd fled the horrors of Europe to be imprisoned in detention camps or could be sent back to the hopeless situation from where they'd come from. I asked Zvi, as one who lived in Israel at the time, what it meant for them and for Israel as a whole to go through the transition from British rule to being a nation in its own right.
Zvi, what was the 1939 white paper and what effect did it have on the Jewish people in Israel?
I tell you, I was a child at that time. I have participated in demonstration and I was wounded and taken by an ambulance to the hospital. My cousin was there and he kidnapped me from the ambulance and took me home, to his home, because we knew that in a few minutes the police will come and every wounded person, he is the one who has participated in the demonstration, so they arrested him. I tell you, I think as a Jew, I think God has given us this country for us.
And he chose Avram, was his name at the time, Abram, we say in English, to the east of us in modern-day Iraq. And he said, leave this land and go to the land that I will show you, and I will give that to you and your descendants. So he came, the Bible records, had a son, Isaac, and another son, but God said the covenant will pass through Isaac. And then he had several more children, one of them being Jacob, and he said the covenant will pass through Jacob and his 12 sons. And the first part of the covenant was this land covenant. He said to Abraham, all the land that you see in front of your eyes, I will give to you and your seed as an eternal possession forever. And this is found in the book of Genesis, but it's also recorded in the Psalms, Psalm 105 and other places. Forever this land connection would be there.
And nobody can come and limit us and say you are allowed to have 50 or 75 or 100,000 Jews in 5 years. No. This is our land, our country. We never told to anybody, don't bring more people to your place. And there were a lot of demonstrations, but we have smuggled Jews along the borders in every place. And my father was very active in that, bringing Jews through Lebanon. I think it was wrong. It was not politically wise to do the white paper. We used to call it the white book. And this created, of course, antagonism with the British government. We didn't like it. And it was not wise to do it. And you know that at the end it did not happen.
Could you describe to us the incident at Herzliya when the Jews were coming in on the boats at the time of the Holocaust and how they were helped by the locals?
I see somebody has told you my story, huh? I was the director of a jail in the rank of major. And you know, in my youth, I come from a very, very poor family. So my brother, but in spite of all, we both left the service as generals. This could happen only in Israel. And I have decided to go to learn a secondary school in a military evening school. And a friend of mine, who was a general at the police at that time, also came to me. We had to learn 1 year and then to go to the university. And we went to see the director. But before that, I would like to explain something. We brought in an illegal way Jews to Israel. The boats would come to Herzliya or to any other places as close as possible to the seashore, and then members of the Haganah will go by foot into the water and take the new immigrants on their shoulders, bring them to the seashore, and change the shirts between them. Why change the shirts? Because if the British police will find somebody, he sees that his shoes are dry. So this one was not in the boat. And then said, the first thing they say, show me your shirt. He had the Israeli shirt. Then he knew this is the Israeli, go away. While the Israelis were with a foreign shirt, and they were wet. So the British would take them and send them to Cyprus to the camp, refugees camp. This is what we wanted. We wanted Israelis to be there to train the refugees. When we came to the secondary school, we asked for the director. Saw the room of the director, knocked on the door, opened the door. Here is sitting a man behind the table. And he saw me and said, good evening, we are two officers. And he saw the other gentleman, Mr. Sela, and he became pale suddenly. I was sure he had a heart attack or he's going to faint. And for seconds, he couldn't talk. And I ran to him. I said, what happened? Is something happened to you? And he couldn't talk. And at the end, after he relaxed a little bit, he said the story. And he said, this man took me down from the boat, changed his shirt with me, and put me in a car. And we immediately escaped from there. And I had one prayer to God, please, give me an opportunity to see this man and to tell him, thank you, thank you, thank you. I said, Mr. Sela was a famous general at the police, and his picture appears in the newspaper at least once in 2 weeks. He said, I know, I saw the picture, but I couldn't go and tell him I want to thank you. I know Mr. Sela brought on his shoulders many, many Jews. So how can I go and tell him? But here, God has sent him here. And he started to cry, and of course, Sela had the tears in his eyes. They embraced each other. And then he called all the teachers from school, tell them the story. And they said, from now on, Mr. Givati and Mr. Sela, whatever they ask anything, you give them all the services. And every time we had an examination, we went to his home, sat with him, and we had succeeded. We passed the examinations. And after a year, I could go to the university to learn public administration.
Can you also describe the conditions that created the 1948 war, the UN partition plan and so on, and what actually happened during the war?
As far as I remember myself, from the very young years, I was aiming for peace. And I think every Israeli was aiming for peace. And in 1929, we had terrorists, and Jews have suffered. And then the Second World War, 1939-45, which was a real tragedy for the Jewish nation. And then came the Committee of Peel, which have decided the partition of the country, where the Palestinians got a larger part of the land than what they have now. But they didn't accept it. I remember the first day when we were sitting near the radio and hearing the counting of the votes, who is for that and who is against that. And we jumped and we started to dance. We went to the street, we danced and sang. And 3/4 of an hour after that, they started to burn the Jewish shops in Jerusalem. Means we were happy, and they started a war against us. And don't forget, it was not the Palestinian only. Jordan was the kingdom. They were trained by the British. They have everything that a good organized army has. Egypt was the kingdom. They had a good army, so Syria, so Lebanon, and an Iraqi soldier. And what were we? 50,000, without anything. And we fought. We fought because we believed we are right. And you know what? The greatest time of the Israelis is during the war. This is such a unity, such a strong, deep belief in the heart that we are right. And if we are right, we will succeed. And that's what happened.
Zvi, can you please describe why the Palestinian Arabs left in 1948? For example, were they expelled by the Jews or did they choose to leave?
I was in Jerusalem, in a quarter called Katamon. And the borders were two sides of the road. And the Israeli army brought a big truck with huge loudspeakers. And they shouted to the Arabs, please, please, don't leave your homes. Just lift a white flag, and if you have arms, put them outside near the door. Nobody will be touched. And there was another car with huge loudspeakers, belonged to the Arabs. They say, leave your homes, and we will be back in 2 days. You will get your homes back, and not that only. You will have everything belong to the Jews. Leave your homes now. And I have the feeling that the leaders wanted one thing. By pushing the population out and send them to Arab countries like Lebanon and Jordan, put a pressure on these countries in order that they will continue to fight against us. Because there are a few families who remain. Nothing happened to them. In 1967, there was again a war. Then nobody escaped. Because they knew the Jews are not killing.
Were the Palestinian Arabs given the opportunity to return to Israel for those that had left?
I don't think it is now possible. I don't think, because you have to know, we were 500,000 Jews in 1948. And there were the same number, or approximately the same number of Arabs. But because of the war, independent war, the Jews had to escape from Morocco, from Tunis, from Algeria, from Lebanon, from Syria, from Iraq, from Egypt. They had to escape because these countries started to make them difficult. They were members, or because they were Jews, not because they were Israelis. And they came here. And we have them as refugees. And if you check the number of Arabs who escaped from Israel, or from Palestine at that time, were nearly 500,000. The number of Jewish refugees that arrived from the Arab countries was nearly 500,000. We just exchanged population. With one small difference. When they came, the Jews, we opened our arms and told them, please, come on, you are our brothers. When they went there to the Arab countries, they insist to leave them in refugees camps. Why did all these Arab countries never change anything? They could rehabilitate them after so many years. They had to live in this situation, and the whole world would have helped them. They didn't want. They wanted to leave this problem alive in order to make pressure on Israel to give them back the land. Now, no Jew will go back to the Arab country. And you know, I know Jews who left houses with a lot of money, big houses in Arab countries. They lost everything. They arrived here as refugees without 1 cent. Some of them had succeeded to take a little bit of jewelry with them, but the rest left everything, and they came.
In 1948, were the Arabs who left Israel allowed to return immediately after the war? And what were the conditions of the return?
There was never a talk about coming back. And I don't think any one of them was ready to come back. They believed that one day they will come back when they see us in the sea. And we don't know this to swim, and we don't like the sea, so we remain in our houses. And meanwhile, new immigrants came from the Arab countries who escaped, and the situation remained this way. And I think the Arab leaders were not interested that they will come. They wanted to leave this problem still alive so that they can fight for it. This is what I think.
There are both Israeli and Palestinian Arabs. This is not generally recognized in the West. We only hear of the Palestinian Arabs. Can you please explain to us how these two groups formed in the first place?
It's very hard to say it, but Israel is our name from the Bible time still. Palestinian, they are Arabs, they are Jewish Palestinians, they call themselves Israelis. And if you believe me, we could live in peace and quiet for a long time if the politicians would not interfere too much. We are here because we believe that the Bible has promised, God has promised in Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and there is a promise to bring us back from all over the world. And I tell you, this is one of the greatest miracles in the world, in the history of the nations at all. Could you imagine after 2,000 years, people who left Israel at that time grew up, not them, but their grandparents grew up in Germany or in Russia or wherever, with a different language, different climate, different education. Suddenly, they wake up and they say, let us go to Zion, to the house of God. This is something which is in the heart. This is something which is in your blood. This is something that sometimes you can even not explain how it happened. My father was one of 10 children of a big rabbi in Russia who was a very, very rich man. He was the supplier of the food of the Tsar's army, and he was a rich man. At the age of 17, he had decided, I want to go to Israel. And my grandfather said, if you go, I will take you off my inheritance. You will get nothing. And my father said, to be in Israel is more important than the money that you give me. And he walked. He didn't have money, so he had to walk to find ways to reach Israel. And here he worked. My mother had one child, and they lived for 2 years in a tent. In a tent. And you know that the tent had 2 pieces, so that it stopped a little bit the cold at night or the heat during the day. But they didn't have such a tent. And she said, every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning when the sun rises, I had to go out of the tent. It was impossible to stay there. It was so hot. So my father built the tent near a tree, and all her life was, for 2 years, was under the tree. And I said, did you complain ever? She said, no. It was normal. We want to be in Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. So we stayed there.
You've mentioned that the Jews and the Arabs could live together if it was not for the politicians. Could you then describe any specific incidents that would illustrate this?
Look, my wife was born in Hartuv in the mountain of Judea, a small village of 12 families who came in 1885. And there were 12 families were surrounded by 5,000 Arabs. And the single person who could make peace between two families, rivals from among the Arab, was my father-in-law. He was an expert in making peace between Arabs. And they lived there for years in great friendship. They have an Arab who lived in their home. They lived together and they worked together and everything was all right. The politicians started. And you know more than that, 1948 when the war started, an Arab would come every night because Hartuf, the small village, was surrounded by Iraqi soldiers. And an Arab would come to the fence every night and bring to my brother-in-law eggs and meat and fruits and vegetables. So there is a way. I have a lot of Arab friends. We could manage very well. Let them not interfere, we could manage. Meanwhile, everyone became a politician. And this is very hard, and I don't want to tell you what I think about politics. Anyhow, I don't like it. And I think there is a human contact between us. And you know, Arabic and Hebrew is the same language. You have so many words which are equivalent, the same thing. Maim is water. Yom and Yom. In Arabic, Yom is day. In Hebrew, Yom is day. It's the same word. Bait in Hebrew is a house. In Arabic, Beit. But it's the same word. So we have a lot in common. If they let us live, we could not find a way.
Abraham is the father, really, of both nations. He said you'd be a great nation.
That's all.
Both to the Jewish people and to the Arabs. And so really you're cousins, in a way.
Look, we are the single nation. When we meet each other, we say shalom, which means peace. There is no other nation who say shalom, say good morning, good night, good evening. We mention peace thousands of times every day, and we have no peace, but we will have it.
Amen.
We are witnessing the arrival of our 50th flight.
50th charter flight.
'Cause I'm gonna make this place your home.
How do you feel when you see the Jewish people returning from all over the world? Do you see it as a sign of God's faithfulness?
Yes, of course. I don't think it would have been possible if not that. And you see them. And you know, the first generation is suffering very much. But when they go to the army and meet the Israelis, the new immigrants and the Israelis, then you immediately feel that it is one nation. It's one big family. And in 50 years, you would never recognize who came from Russia and who came from Yemen.
Just know you're not alone. 'Cause I'm gonna make this place your home. Settle down, it'll all be clear. Don't pay no mind to the demons, they fill you with fear. The trouble it might drag you down. You get lost, you can always be found. Just know you're not alone. 'Cause I'm gonna make this place your home.
Do you see the return of the Jews from Russia then, perhaps as the fulfillment of Scripture, as you've explained? Could you compare that to the time of Moses and the Exodus?
I think it was the same thing. I think it was the same thing. It was an exodus. They all came back, worked very hard, suffered. Many people died at the age of 35, 40. They had malaria, they have all sorts of sickness, but they lived here and they knew why they lived. The joy, the happiness was every day after they finish a very hard day of work. They drink a cup of tea with a piece of bread with jam and then started to dance and to sing. It is our home.
'Cause I'm gonna make this place your home.
Zvi, over the last 2,000 years, the Christians have done some pretty awful things to the Jewish people. But what would you say with regard to the modern history of Christians perhaps being involved in recognizing the right for the Jews to live in Israel? Do you see that as being somewhat of a change and a shift from the past?
How many Christians believe in that? And what the percentage among the Christians who believe in that and others who have other ideas? I grew up as a child. I have my personal experience, which was terrible with Christians. I hated Christians in a terrible way, because in Lebanon the Arab Christian children has beaten us, has torn our clothing, made us all sorts of terrible difficulties, and tortures us, and we had to stay at home and play, my brother and I alone. I never played with children. I have lost my youth because the children, the Christians, and I hate them terribly. And the day I left Lebanon, I was very happy. I came to Israel and went to a Jewish school, and later on I am telling it very fast, I couldn't continue to study because it costed a lot of money and my parents had no money. So I went to a Christian school, and there the Christian did not beat us. They didn't curse us, they didn't tear our copybooks and books or clothing, but they did something else. That every time that they were playing, and I as a child of 12 years old, came to play with them. I wanted to play, I didn't want anything. And the moment I came, they turned their back and left. And I tell you, I don't think that in my life anybody has succeeded to humiliate me more than these children. And I tried and I tried. And I asked myself, why do they do that? And then I have decided that the single way to buy their friendship is to learn well and to help the Christian boys in their studies. And I started to sit down in the kitchen every night until midnight and to learn. And very quickly I became the first pupil in the class. And every time the teacher asked a question, I was the first one to lift my hand. And when there was a break and we went outside to play, I went to the children, you want me to help you in arithmetic, you want me to help you in history? They turned their back, they don't want it. Not only they don't want it, they started to hate me much more because we have a single Jew in the class. And he is the best one. They didn't know I am the best one because I wanted to play, not because I wanted to study. I had no alternative. I wanted to survive. And it didn't help me. And when I finished the Italian boys' school, which was a Christian school, I said, thanks God, I have finished with it. And for years, I didn't want to see a Christian. For years, I never talked to a Christian. I hated them. And I want you to know, let your viewers know, a Jew is grow up from the first day of his life. They started to teach him, be careful. The Christians want to proselytize you. They want to make of you Christian. Be careful. If they are nice, it's only because of that. And one day my wife said, we have a Jewish family, Messianic Jewish family, and the lady invited somebody for dinner. A couple, Inge and Christian Svensson from Denmark. And she said to my wife, I want you and Zvi to come for dinner. She probably wanted to show to this Danish friend that she has important. They thought that I am important because I was a general. And I said to my wife, these are Christians. Yes, Christian from Denmark. And the lady wants us to have dinner with them. I said, never. I am not going to have dinner with Christians. I don't want to talk with them. I had enough. And I was, at that time, more than 40 years old. And I didn't talk with Christian at that time. But then, you know, as in every couple, it's not the wife who says the last word. I always say the last word. I say, yes, darling. But the last word is with me. And I went. And the gentleman started to tell me his stories, how he helped Israel by collecting money. And I told him, if you want to help Israel, send young Christians to work here, to volunteer here. And I don't know how this very strange idea came to my mind. I hated Christian, and here I invite Christian to come to work. You know what? For years, I didn't understand. I think it was only God that wanted to put it in my heart. And he said, you can fix it? I said immediately, yes, without knowing whether I can fix it or no. But for me, if there is something which I think it's right, I will fix it. Even if I go through the wall, but I will fix it. There is no alternative. You cannot advance in your life. And next morning, I went to the mayor of Jerusalem, Teddy Kollek, and told him I have a group of so-called crazy Christians because they want to come to help Israel. They want to volunteer here. He said, bring them. I say, you give me a letter, because I knew when the mayor promised you something, it's not enough. He gave me a letter. I agreed that Christians from Denmark will come to work, and they work with elderly home, with single elderly people, handicapped and not handicapped. They go and clean their house, they take them for a walk, buy them medicine, do other things. And we have created in Denmark the Danish Jewish Friendship Association. And I was invited to go to Denmark to speak to a big meeting of this association. And I took my wife and I went there. It was very nice. First time in my life in Scandinavia. In Denmark, everything new. And they put us in a Bible school. Took my shower, put my tie, went down and asked my wife, where are we going to be? Where do I have to speak? And somebody came, one of the hostess there, and I said, where do we speak? And he showed me a building. He said, there. And this was a big building with a cross on the roof. And I said, sir, this is a church. And he said, yes. And you want me to go to a church to speak? And he said, yes. You know what? If he would have told me that in 10 minutes the world will be destroyed, maybe I would be less astonished than that. Say, I am not going to speak in a church. Take it out of your head. And I sat down. And at this moment, all the anger against my dear wife, Esther, came out. And I say, you started with the dinner, and look where I am. Svi Givati has to go to a church to speak. Could you imagine such a thing? As I said, what can you do? It's too late now. I said, nothing is late. Let them come outside. 350 people. How would they come outside? At the end, as usual, as I told you, I say the last word, but we went to the church, and it was horrible. For me, the way from the place where I was sitting up to the church was the same feeling that a prisoner convicted to death going from his cell to the place where they would hang him. Coming close to the door, the big door of the church, I saw a banner there, and I could read it from far, and it was written, Israel, you are not alone. And I looked there, yes, they say, Israel, you are not alone. All my life I was alone. All my life I felt that Christian did not lift a finger to stop the Holocaust. That Christian throughout in the 15th century from Spain, that all my life we had terror from the Christians. And here, in a church, Christians saying me, you are not alone. And without willing, without feeling how it comes, the tears started to go from my eyes. And I look at my wife, and she was also crying. So we gave hand, and we went in. And there I heard the Christian speaking. And I said to myself, Zvi, from now to the last day of your life, you will do everything you can to bring closer Christians and Jews. To explain to the Christians the problem of the Jews, but to explain to the Jews what kind of Christian friend we have. And if there is any meaning in the Bible of comfort, comfort ye my people, is the lectures that I am giving to Jews about the Christian embassy and the work that the Christian embassy is doing in Israel.
You are a wonderful personal friend, but you're also a true patriot of Israel. And you bring here so many of Israel's friends. And I simply want to say from my heart, from Sarah's heart, Toda Rabah, thank you. And the state of Israel salutes you.
You could see, you know what, I will try to demonstrate you, I don't know how to say it, how it is. When I come to a place, the Israelis are sitting around the table, this man is coming to tell us all sorts of stories of Christians. What can be interesting in such a thing? And you could see the sarcasm on their face. And sometimes you see somebody is looking on the roof, and the other one is writing, the other one is holding a newspaper on the table. He was invited to a lecture, so he came. It's a small place. There are no lecturers every day, so he came. And after a few minutes, the one who was looking on the roof started to look at me. The one who was reading the newspaper stopped to read the newspaper and look at me. And after 20 minutes, you see their red eyes. And the tears start at the beginning, one, and then they start to have the handkerchief. And I have always the same question. Zvi, this is a wonderful story. Why did we not know about it before? And maybe I got my blood pressure because of the Israeli television, the Israeli newspaper, who never liked to write not about the good thing that the Christians are doing, but anything good that is done in this country. When you take the newspaper, here is a murder, here is a killer, here is somebody who have stolen money from poor people. Good things they don't write. And coming to speak in houses, in synagogues, in groups, in halls, I go all over the places. And I tell them, the Bible said, comfort, comfort ye my people. This is the main reason why the embassy exists, to comfort us, all Jews and Israelis. And I know, I talk in one place and immediately those people, some of them will immediately prepare me another lecture in another place. And I go to speak, I am not getting any money for the work, free of charge is doing it. Because I think it's very important for them to know you have Christian friends.
Zvi, how deep is your own faith? What does God mean to you?
Look, I am a Jew and I believe in Judaism. I didn't change my faith. I changed my attitude toward Christians. And I think that we are all children of God. And there is one God in the world. There are no two gods in the world. There is only one. I don't know who is right, the Christians or the Jews. When the Messiah will come, we will stand on the Mount of Olives and we will wait for him. And we will ask him, what's your name? If he said Jesus, all the Jews will become Christians. If he says Ben David, all the Christians will become Jews. But then there is another point, a little bit laughing, saying, but he might tell you, my name is Jesus, but I was a Jew and I am still a Jew. This is also possible.
Do you see the attachment to perhaps the fact that now Israel is a nation that it hasn't been for over 2,000 years? Do you see any significance between that and the coming of the Messiah?
I don't think the Messiah would have come when there was a tribe of people sitting here. Israel was once a great nation. Now you know how many great nations were the Greek and the Roman and other countries. Where are they? Where are they all? Germany has taken 3/4 of Europe. Where is Germany today? If not the European, the American would help them. It was nothing. Russia, the big empire, where is it now? But the single small nation, 6 million have been killed. And it raises up again. It's only the will of God who made it. But look, the main thing is to have a pure heart. The main thing is to have love to the others. If I had not a big heart with full of love to people, I couldn't be a good director of a jail. I couldn't be. You go at the jail, at the solitary confinement, at 2 o'clock in the morning, when the prisoner is staying there in a very narrow, small cell, punished for 15 days. Take a small bench, sit down, and talk with the prisoner behind the bar. He, the prisoner, will never, ever in his life forget this evening. I used to do it as a prison director, at least once a week, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. I woke up and went in the yard. We had many cells there. I am talking about the central prison. 350 lifers were there. Every one of them have killed at least once, if not more. But you see, even a criminal, even sometimes he is in personal difficulties. And there are no doors there are only bars. So I used to stand there and look and see one of the prisoners who cannot sleep. I had a small bench with me. I put it on the floor and said, Yaakov or Chaim or whatever it was, come here. And he was sitting behind the bars and talking about his children who have no father because the father is in jail, talking about his wife. Sometimes he himself, in a certain moment, had his personal difficulties and would like to have his wife near to him. He could not. But he might think that maybe his wife now is with another man. And this was very hard. And we used to sit and talk about it. And I had many prisoners who I met them years later. Some of them still in jail. Some of them were released after 20 years, 15 years. They would say, Mr. Givati, this evening that you came and sat on the bench near the door and talked with me, this is the most unforgettable night I had in my life. Because director of a jail is the most important person in the world for a prisoner. The director can decide which clothing he will have, where he will work, because there are places who are more comfortable, less comfortable, more interesting, less interesting. He will give him the better cell, he will give him the better bed, he will give him the better... Director of jail can do everything. All the life of a prisoner depends on him. So for him, director of a jail is very important. And here comes the director himself, sit down and talk with him. This is human. And this is one of the best way to rehabilitate prisoners. I want you to know, I knew the names of all the prisoners. I knew the history of all the prisoners. They were a long time in jail. And every letter that came into the jail, we had to open and to read it. And sometimes the prisoner would get a letter that his son is sick. The role of the man who makes the censor would be to come to me and to tell me, this gentleman, his son is sick, his wife wrote him a letter. So I would go for inspection and find him. They tell me, how is your son? That the fever went better. Well, how was the operation? And he was so surprised. The director of a jail has nothing to think only about my son. You cannot imagine how important it's for him. And I think we had to try to rehabilitate the prisoners. And to try to rehabilitate them is not only by teaching them a profession, which is important, but there are many other things. And if there is no humanity, then whatever you do in jail will not help. If you allow me to tell you a short story, and if you don't want to give it to your viewer, you can take it off. I had two prisoners convicted for life because they have shot somebody for political reasons. There was no reason, they were not involved in politics. Somebody came in the last minute and incited them. He said, this man is a traitor, he should be killed, and they brought them to jail. One of them is a son of a very, very rich father who left his wife, the mother of this boy, when he was 8 years old. The father was very rich. He left the mother with 2 children without a cent to live, and the mother had to work very hard to educate the children. And he never took care about his children. Now when the boy came to jail, after a long time, we made a show where the prisoners were acting. But it was a psychodrama show where I gave to, together with the psychologist, of course, we gave to every prisoner a role in this show that was nearly equivalent to what he did in life. And this enabled him, in the show he can say whatever he wants. Privately, when he talks with you, he's closed. He cannot admit things, he cannot talk about things. And we gave him a part in the show where he said these children had to be beaten all their life because they are bad. At the end of the show, he said it is not the fault of the children. Maybe the father should be punished. And I have invited the father of this boy to come to see the show. I called him and I said, your son is convicted for life. He is here for 9 months. You never came to visit him. You must come. And he came. And I appointed a social welfare to sit and to see his reaction only in the moment that the boy will say this, father. I say, I want you to see him and tell me exactly what do you think. And when the moment came, he was shocked. When we have finished the show and everyone went home, he said, Mr. Givati, I would like to talk with you. I was very impressed by the show, and what I want from you is to tell you that, excuse me, to tell you that I am ready to cover all the expenses of the drama group, which cost a lot of money. And I said, you know what, mister, we really are out of budget. We have no money. But I need from you another great thing that you can contribute to the prison. And he said, what was it? By all means. He said, come once a week and stay with your son for half an hour. Because he loves you. He needs you. He's insecure, and you can help him. This boy is 25 years. He has at least other 50 to 70 years to live. You can help him. Please come. And I saw his tears in his eyes, and after a few minutes he gave me his hand and left without saying shalom. But he never came back to jail. And I don't know who was the killer, the boy who killed this political man, or the father who killed the boy. In Hebrew there is a say that the one who saved one soul of Israel as if he have saved all the world. I have the feeling that I have saved all the world many times by saving a lot of young delinquents. And my last day, I want to know that I did something for my nation. I did something for the young children. And I did something for Jews and Christians to bring them closer. And with that, I have fulfilled my role in this world, not only to eat and to sleep, but to do other things. And I thank you very much for inviting me to speak here. And if I can say a word to the English people, I spent 3.5 months in England, most of them in London, but I travel all over the places. And I have learned at the Wakefield High Officers Course, and I have wonderful, wonderful memories of every day that I was there. And for that, after so many years, I would like to thank you again for the hospitality, for the friendship, and for the help you gave me. Thank you very much, and shalom to everybody.
Thank you, Zvi.
From the moment I had the privilege of interviewing Zvi Givati, way back in the summer of 1999, I'd been endeavouring to produce a programme from that interview. And now, some 15 years later, I have eventually completed this documentary. Forgive me for taking so long. I believe that this dear man's testimony will reach not only your intellect, but more importantly, touch your heart. I thank God for the life and service to mankind which Zvi ministered so tirelessly. And though he is no longer with us in the flesh, I pray that the spirit of this wonderful man shall live on throughout eternity. Thank you for watching.